Joining us now is CNN political commentator Peter Beinart. He's a contributing editor to Atlantic Media and senior columnist at Haaretz. Also with us, Jonathan Schanzer. He's vice president of research for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Peter, let me start with you. Do you think there's any chance for an expansion of this 4-hour ceasefire that's just been called?
Doesn't seem that likely. First of all, you don't have a trusted mediator on either side. Egypt, which is the country that Israel would rather deal with, has a very hostile relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the kind of cousin of Hamas. Hamas would rather deal with Qatar or Turkey, which Israel doesn't trust. And also you have very different aims. Hamas is going to be hard-pressed not to come out of this with some relief from Israel's blockade, while Israel is now talking about the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. So these are quite widely divergent aims.
Jonathan, what do you think happens at the end of these 4 hours?
Well, I think it's quite likely that Hamas is going to continue to fire. They've made it pretty clear from their leadership abroad in Doha, also from their leadership on the ground in the Gaza Strip, that they see no end in sight so long as the Israeli blockade exists. Of course, the Israelis are not interested in lifting that blockade as long as Hamas remains militarized and is able to fire rockets into Israel.
Exactly. Okay, so the Palestinians want the blockade lifted. The Israelis want the tunnels destroyed. These seem like mutually beneficial goals. What is the sticking point? Why can't we make any progress on some sort of treaty?
Well, first of all, it's not clear who would oversee this demilitarization. I mean, Israel doesn't want to go back to directly occupying Gaza. The Palestinian Authority right now doesn't have a presence in Gaza. So it's not clear who, in fact, is going to be ruling Gaza to make sure you're going to go house to house to make sure there are not stockpiles of weapons anywhere. So that's not a small issue. And then the blockade, on the one hand, Israel has some legitimate security concerns. On the other hand, there are these enormous Palestinian grievances, not just Hamas, but almost all Palestinians who believe that the blockade has suffocated the Palestinian economy. So these are also, I think, both very, very difficult issues to resolve.
Jonathan, do you think that there is anything that could get some movement here, get us past loggerheads?
Well, look, I think the role of Egypt is going to be crucial here if the Egyptians can make this happen. They're talking right now with Mahmoud Abbas from the Palestinian Authority and some of the other actors from within Gaza. I still think they're crucial. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the two countries that border Gaza to help broker this, and that comes down to Egypt and Israel.
I want to talk about the U.S.'s role. A top Israeli official, the housing minister, went on a radio show yesterday, and he basically told President Obama to butt out. He said, quote, "Leave us alone, go focus on Syria." Is that a widespread sentiment in Israel that the U.S. is meddling somehow?
Look, the housing minister of this Israeli government, like many members of this Israeli government, unfortunately, want permanent control over the Palestinians in perpetuity in the West Bank, as well as for Israel's continuing occupation over Gaza. I think that's very, very bad for Israel's long-term interests. And I think it's in the United States' national security interest not to have a continuing war that not only has a terrible humanitarian cost, but also inflames hostility to the United States all over the region.
But Jonathan, do you think that Secretary Kerry has been able to get any traction? Is he being helpful, or is he getting pushback from the Israelis during the process?
Look, Secretary Kerry has done an admirable job trying to get a ceasefire. I think he has stumbled along the way. There's been a lot of talk in Israel right now about how he forwarded a ceasefire plan that was endorsed and, in fact, perhaps even written by Qatar and Turkey, which are, of course, the top patrons of Hamas. This was not really appreciated by the Israelis. The fact that you had a peace process that collapsed under Secretary Kerry's watch, I think, also eroded confidence among Israelis. But the bottom line is that there are 86.5% of Israelis who roundly support this operation in Gaza because they feel that they are really fighting for Israel's security, and they want to get the job done based on military objectives, not political objectives.
Right, so the Israelis feel that they are fighting for their security. And, Peter, you were saying that the Palestinians feel that nonviolence, when they've tried it, hasn't worked for them. They haven't been rewarded for their nonviolence.
So the tragedy for me is that if you want to defeat, weaken Hamas, you have to show that those Palestinian leaders like Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank, who have recognized Israel's right to exist, who are doing very good security cooperation with Israel, are getting something for this nonviolence and this mutual recognition. Under this Israeli government, unfortunately, they've gotten the largest settlement growth in Israeli history, massive subsidies for settlement construction. An Israeli government that has not been willing to put any map on the table in terms of negotiations, has still not even publicly accepted the very notion of a Palestinian state near the 1967 lines. That just makes Hamas's job so much easier because it discredits those Palestinians who have tried to take the alternative, better path.
Jonathan, what do you think about that notion that Palestinians have tried nonviolence and not been rewarded? I'm sure Israelis feel that they would like to stop having missiles fired at them.
Well, look, when it comes to Palestinian politics, you have to understand that the choices that the Palestinians have right now are really not choices at all. On the one hand, you've got Mahmoud Abbas, and yes, he's been nonviolent. He's been committed to ensuring that another intifada doesn't happen or another war doesn't happen. But this is a man who's now 9 years into a 4-year term. He's been roundly criticized as being corrupt, having an ossified rule, a government that doesn't respond to the people. And on the other hand, you have Hamas, which is basically a genocidal jihadi organization. This is not giving the Palestinians a chance to really make real choices. There's been a stagnation on the political level, and that really has not a lot to do with Israel. That has a lot to do with just the lack of dynamics within the Palestinian political spectrum.
How can you say it doesn't have to do with Israel? The Palestinians agreed to a national unity government precisely in order so they could have elections, so Abbas could stop continuing to govern even though he had lost his democratic legitimacy. Only elections can produce a legitimate Palestinian leadership in both the West Bank and Gaza, and this Israeli government has done everything in its power to destroy that unity government, even though it accepted the quartet conditions and therefore was endorsed by both the U.S. and the European Union.
Jonathan, very quickly, response?
Sure. The critique from the Israelis is that you had a Hezbollah model in the Gaza Strip, that Hamas remained militarized, and there was no way that you could endorse a unity government under those conditions. It's just that simple.
Though nothing is simple. It sounds simple at first blush, and then when you get into it, you see all of these nuances. Peter Beinart, Jonathan Schanzer, thanks so much for the context. Great to see both of you.
Yeah.